So let's start, well, at the start of the game. The first thing you need to be aware of as a beginner are junglers' starting locations. Wherever a jungler starts, they're going to be pathing to the opposite side of the map as they clear their camps. This results in them having a very predictable gank timing at the end. At the same time, their camps are going to be respawning in that same order, causing them to once again path towards that side of the map, resulting in another gank. This creates a concept that's known as the strong side and weak side. If a jungler starts on the bottom side, then the bottom half of the map is considered the weak side for that team, since they'll be ganking there less often, whereas the top side is considered the strong side for their team, since they'll be ganking there more often. The trick you want to implement into your games is to identify the enemy jungler's starting location. You can do this by paying attention to the side lanes at the start of every game. Whoever is last to arrive in lane usually gave their jungler a leash, letting you predict the jungler's starting location. This then lets you know if you're the enemy's weak side or strong side, and whether you should be anticipating ganks. The simple counter to being the enemy's strong side is to place a ward at 2 minutes and 45 seconds. This will catch all the early gank timings by the enemy jungler. The next thing you need to know is the level 2 timing. Spiking level 2 while the opponent is still level 1 is by far the most common and easiest way you're going to win or lose your lane. This is because being level 2 gives you more base stats over the opponent while having access to one additional spell over the enemy. For this reason, you need to know the following level 2 timings. For solo laners, you'll hit level 2 on the second minion wave once the first melee minion dies. For bot laners, you're going to hit level 2 when you've killed 3 melee minions or 2 melees and 1 caster. When players first learn about these timings, they always make the same mistake. They wait until they hit level 2 and then they try to go aggressive. Players are just going to see you spike level 2 and back off and play safe. So the skill you want to develop is positioning yourself so you're within engage range before you hit level 2, so you can instantly punish the enemy. Once you get better, you can even time your engage slightly before you hit level 2, so then you level up during the fight. So now you're wondering, should you be fighting for level 2 every single time then? Well, yes, but only if you're in a ranged versus ranged or melee versus melee matchup. Ranged versus melee matchups are unique and something you must learn. A super common beginner mistake is to try and fight for the push as the melee champion. You're going to get destroyed if you do this. The fact that the ranged champion has access to a ranged auto attack at level 1 while you only have access to one spell means trying to hit level 2 more often than not results in you losing all of your health. Instead, the default game plan if you're the melee champion is to sit back, conserve your health, even giving up last hits if needed. You then wait until the minions crash into your tower, and then once you hit level 3, you'll have all your basic abilities and a full health pool. That's your time to start going aggressive, which works more often than not due to the enemy ranged champion being super pushed up the lane. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what is the ranged champion supposed to do then? Well, this is the next thing you need to know. Rebounds. A rebound happens when you push a wave into a tower. 99% of the time, it's going to cause the minions to then push back towards you. This is where the name comes from. It's like you're rebounding the minions off the tower. The reason this happens is that the next incoming wave will start damaging the wave much sooner since it's closer to that side of the map. The only time it doesn't rebound is when the wave gets cleared before the next wave gets stuck on it. This is called a reset as the wave now goes back to neutral at the center of the lane. So in a ranged versus melee matchup, when the ranged champion crashes the wave, they can know a rebound is going to happen. This means it's now their turn to play safe, giving up minions as needed as it bounces back to them to a safer position. Or if they got the melee champion low, they can use it to set up a kill by forcing them to overextend for last hits. Rebounds go way beyond that though, as they're basically what will let you leave lane. Need to recall? Well, push the wave, for which sets up a rebound. Now you can recall, and as you head back to lane, the wave is bouncing back to you, so you miss practically no minions. Want to roam? Again, push the wave first, go off and roam, and then head back to lane with the wave pushing back to you, missing very few minions. Now, you might be thinking, so does that mean each person is just taking turns rebounding waves to one another? Well, honestly, yeah, a lot of lanes do end up feeling turn-based like that, but there is one exception: freezing. Freezing is one of the most misunderstood things in League. At its core, it is simple. You just make sure the enemy has around 4 to 5 more minions than your wave, and you can just permanently keep the wave frozen in front of your tower. What new players get wrong when they first learn this is they try to freeze as a way to keep themselves safe. This isn't possible. If you're losing, the enemy is just going to be able to walk up, push the wave, and you can't fight them. Instead, freezing is done only when you're the one with the lead. This is because it forces the enemy to have to overextend to last hit minions, at which point you can fight them with your lead, often killing them. Or, if they don't extend, they just bleed out a ton of farm over time to the freeze. And speaking of fighting, a beginner mistake players make is fighting way too much. The concept you need to know to fix this is called dead time. Dead time is the period of time when either all your jungle camps are dead, or the minions in lane are dead, and you're waiting for the next wave to arrive. This is the most efficient time for you to fight, since you're not giving up any gold or experience from those minions or monsters. I know that it feels like if you don't react to a fight, you're gonna fall behind from the enemy getting kills, but this is a misconception. In the early game, simply farming one wave at one turret plate is nearly worth the same as a kill. well. In the mid to late game, if someone leaves an inner turret undefended, that's 700 gold from the tower, and just 2 waves on top of that equals 300 gold. So suddenly, simply pushing 2 waves and taking a tower is more than getting 3 kills worth of gold. As a beginner, you really shouldn't be fighting outside of your dead time. You learn as you get better the exceptions to the rule. The other mistake you want to avoid is staying on the map for too long when you have unspent gold. It's really easy to make this mistake since you'll be on the map getting a ton of kills and feel like you're stronger than the enemy. But unless you spend that gold, you're actually weaker, since by killing them, they got to go back to base and spend their gold and get a stat advantage by purchasing items. A really good rule of thumb to follow is to start planning your recall once you pass 1,000 gold. A lot of items are around that amount, like Faded Ashes and Serrated Dirk, for example. That being said, as you get more experience, you want to identify your next item spike and recall once you pass that amount. So, for a lot of mages mid, that would be Lost Chapter at 1,200 gold, for example, or Hextech Alternator at 1,100. Or for a lot of bruisers, that can be Tiamat at 1,200. And another mistake to look out for when it comes to recalling is getting baited by turret plates early on. A lot of the time, when newer players find out turret plates give 125 gold each, well, they end up throwing their whole lane trying to get one. This happens most often after you get a kill on your lane opponent. You'll figure, hey, they're dead, and despite sitting on a lot of gold and being low on resources like health and mana, you'll mistakenly think you have enough time to take that turret plate and then recall after. But death timers are very short early on, and when you die, you get home guards, which gets you back to lane really fast. So, by staying for that plate, you'll end up low on resources, stuck in lane, or having to recall on a bad timing. Now, our final tip in the laning phase is that speed really matters in League. For example, here, Talia is going to be simply better and thus faster at clearing her jungle than the enemy Master Yi. The result of this is Talia is able to fully clear all 6 camps in her jungle in the same time Master Yi could only clear 5. This means when they both arrive top, Talia is an entire level up from that extra camp. This not only denies Master Yi a gank on top, but also gets him low, while then giving Talia the scuttle, which ends up turning into an easy kill. All of this was made possible simply due to the fact that Talia spent time optimizing her clear, and so was just faster. Many ways you can save time in League though. It's not just jungle clears. For example, if your champion can one-shot the caster minions with an ability, it can often be better to move as far up the lane as you can to then cast the ability on the melee minions. Then, once the wave meets, you can hit the entire wave clearing it all at once. This will then give you extra time between waves you can use to roam, recall, or pressure towers faster. In fact, one of the best ways to be faster isn't mechanical, but actually with decision making. For example, here, Talia is reacting to a possible fight, but by recognizing and accepting the fight is lost early on, it means she's pivoting to her next source of gold way faster than if she was tunneling on the fight and trying to get a kill, thus generating more gold per second for her. Honestly, if you just go for guaranteed gold while focusing on being faster at doing it, you're gonna be miles ahead of your opponents. Now, let's get into mechanics. There are 5 mechanics as a beginner you must know. First is that in League, clicking closer to your champion gives you a big edge over your opponent. This is because when a skill shot is thrown at you, your mouse has to move less distance to then send a movement command in a different direction. Compare this to when you're clicking far away, and you can see how much more distance your mouse has to cover and how hard it is to dodge abilities. Of course, if you have to auto attack or cast a spell further away, that's fine, but for movement commands, you typically want to keep them close to your champion. The next mechanic you need to be using is sending movement commands between auto attacks. Your auto attack has 2 parts to its animation, the wind up and the wind down. The animation up until the projectile releases is the wind up, or for melee champions up until you do damage to the enemy. It's really bad to send a movement command during this time since it's going to cancel your auto attack and do no damage. The animation that plays after the projectile releases or the damage is applied as a melee champion is the wind down animation. This can be cancelled with a movement command, and by moving between our auto attacks we make ourselves very hard to hit and can cover a lot more distance if we're either chasing or kiting. In addition to this, you absolutely must use what's called the attack move command. This is essential since if you don't use it, if you misclick the ground beside an enemy, you're going to be walking into them. Attack moving makes your champion attack the nearest enemy even if you misclick on the ground beside them. There are a few settings though you need to use for this to work properly. First, enable attack move on cursor. This makes you attack the nearest target to your cursor instead of your champion. This is way better since if you don't have this enabled and try to attack an enemy behind someone, well, you're just going to be hitting the closest target to your champion instead. Next is show attack range. This will show you a circle around your champion of your attack range every time you press the default attack move bind of A on your keyboard. This is really helpful since it lets you know how you should be positioning. Now, you can use other attack move binds Just enable those settings and use the A hotkey and then left click to send attack move commands if you're new to this mechanic. The next setting you need to be aware of is quick casting. This gives you such a huge advantage as it makes you cast your spells way faster, since as soon as you press your spell key, it's going to immediately fire. Now, I know what you're thinking, well then I can't actually aim my abilities. Here's the trick that players use. They bind their normal cast to shift plus that ability. So shift plus Q, shift plus W, shift plus E, shift plus R. This way, if you need to combo fast, you can just press your abilities as normal. But if you need to line up a skill shot, you can press shift and the ability to aim it. You'll also need this backup shift bind for warding. This is because you need the aim indicator to know when it's being placed in a brush, since it will turn green. And at the same time, the circle is going to let you know how far the ward sees, so you know you're actually covering choke points. And the final mechanic you need is to unlock your camera. For a lot of players, this can feel awkward, but it gives you a big advantage since you can pan your camera to see way more information when you're fighting, while at the same time, it lets you see more angles you can expect enemies to come from so you can react sooner. There are some really simple exercises to get yourself used to this mechanic. Head into practice mode. Start by nudging your camera so that your champion always stays on the edge of your screen. After this, practice moving in straight lines where you click around the center of your screen and nudge your camera to keep your champion close to the edge. Once you master this, head into the river. Again, you're right-clicking around the halfway point of your screen, then nudge your camera up, spam right-click, then left, spam right-click, and repeat. You then want to go back down the river the other way. Nudge your camera down, spam right-click, then right, spam right. Great. Now let's talk about what you need to know in the mid to late game. The mid game starts around 14 minutes when turret plates fall. That's when players can start moving around the map more. And the late game is usually around 25 to 30 minutes when things like Dragon Soul become a threat for a team to take. So, firstly, during this time in the game, you should be aware of a concept called gold inflation. In League, having early gold leads are much more impactful because they represent a larger percentage of the total gold in the game. For example, if someone has 6k gold and you have 3k gold for a 3k gold lead on you at 10 minutes, well that means they're 100% more powerful than you are in terms of items. But if that same person has a 3k gold advantage at 25 minutes when you have 13k gold and they have 16k gold, well, that's only around 16% more powerful than you. And it goes without saying, when everyone is full build, then gold leads don't even matter at that point since you can't convert that extra gold into items. Long story short, when you're behind early on, just by delaying the game, even if you don't shorten the gold lead or even if it gets worse, it's actually still an improvement due to how gold inflation works. Now, the next thing you're about to learn is the foundational concept to all other macro concepts in League: number advantages. The vast majority of all fights you will have in League of Legends won't be decided by gold leads, mechanics, or the champion types. It's going to be decided by which team has more players at that fight. And most players really struggle with map awareness, and so they're constantly taking fights where they're outnumbered without really realizing it. The solution to this is simple. Once turret plates fall at 14 minutes and the mid game hits, you need to be looking at the map a lot. The goal is to identify what teammates you have nearby and what enemies you can see on the map. If you can only see 2 enemies and 3 other are missing, well, play it safe. If your team is grouped as 5 and you see 1 enemy in the side lane, awesome, look to fight. You know you have the number advantage. Literally every macro tactic you're going to learn when you're more experienced just builds on this one principle, so it's best to focus on getting good at this first. The next thing to be aware of during the mid to late game is the pressure rule. The basic concept of pressure is defined as when someone on your team is threatening to damage a tower. This is because to do this, they're also pushing a wave into the tower, so they're threatening 2 things. 1, to just straight up destroy the tower, which can be worth a lot of gold, and 2, for the wave they push to then die to the tower. This is a loss of golden experience for the enemy team if no one comes to pick up that wave. In the mid to late game, simply look at the map and identify if your team has pressure. When they do, then you need to be pressuring 2 in some way. That can mean grouping with them to pressure the same tower, it can mean pressuring a completely separate tower, or it can mean looking to take a neutral objective. You do this for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's incredibly hard to defend when an entire team coordinates pressure at the same time. It just works the majority of the time in solo queue. Secondly, when your team is pressuring, they're often going to get some sort of defense from the enemy team. So if you don't match their pressure and you go off to farm safely, well, you're likely leaving your team down in numbers for that upcoming fight. The inverse of this is also true. So when your team has no pressure, well, that's your time to focus on playing defensive, safe, and look to passively farm rather than pressure yourself. The next mid to late game rule to follow is the empty lane rule. Before you do anything, you want to pay attention to if there's empty lanes and push them out before you really do much. Remember what you just learned about pressure. By pushing waves, you create pressure. This will set up 2 simple but effective tactics. Either no one from the enemy team defends that push, which means tons of free gold and experience for you, or by pushing, you bait a defender from the enemy team to respond to it, at which point you can rotate off while the enemy is busy with the wave to look for a number advantage fight elsewhere. If you just follow the following 3 things, number advantages, the pressure rule, and the empty lane rule, you're going to be ahead of like 90% of the player base as a new player. Also, I quickly want to mention mention a common trap newer players fall for in the mid to late game. They try to take inhibitors before taking Baron. League of Legends isn't designed for this to happen. It will be really easy for 1 or 2 champions on the enemy team just to clear that wave in an instant and defend the tower. You'll waste a lot of time getting not a lot done while being very overextended at the enemy's base. It's the most common way leads are thrown. Instead, League is designed for you to take Baron first and then use that Baron buff to siege towers to then take the inhibitors. You want to set up your Baron takes with 2 simple steps. Step 1, push out mid lane. Remember, it creates pressure and pins down enemies defending it. This will give you a timing window to go and get vision control around Baron. This means using sweepers and control wards to clear the enemy's vision around Baron, and then placing your own vision deeper into the enemy's jungle so you can see them early on if they come to try and contest your Baron take. Step 2 is then starting the Baron. If you pushed mid first and established vision control, the vast majority of the time you're going to get Baron for free uncontested. However, if you see the enemy is moving to contest your Baron take, then you want to stop doing Baron and instead move to make a pick on them. Since you cleared their vision first, they won't know you're there, making for easy kills. Those easy kills mean you have the number advantage, so you can just go back to taking Baron after. And finally, our last beginner tip has to do with setting realistic expectations. There's a reason why players refer to grinding solo queue as, well, a grind. Let's say you were bronze 4. If you maintained a 55% win rate, it would take you 160 games on average to get to silver 4. Bronze has an average game duration of 30 minutes. That means this will take you 80 hours of playing. And if you played 3 hours a day every day, it would still take you 27 days to get to silver. At the same time, a very reasonable expectation you should develop is that around 1 out of 3 of the games you play will be unwinnable. You don't know which games those will be, so you still have to be level-headed and try your best no matter how doomed the games feel. And I know that losing 1 in 3 games sounds like a lot, that would still mean you'd have a 66% win rate, which is incredibly high and makes for a fast climb. That's why it's really important to have a healthy, long-term mentality when playing this game, and try not to let the short-term losses mean too much to you.